How's it going, everybody? So, today I want to talk about one of the first speed bumps I ran into when it comes to making quality coffee at home. I had a V60 and I had a gooseneck kettle and I had a scale and I had this electric grinder. It was like probably $180 or so. It was a Breville that I thought was fairly good as far as the reviews that I read about and everything. But I just couldn't seem to make good coffee. I kept making either it was sour or it was bitter. Sometimes it tasted like it was both. And I was just wondering, like, okay, is it because of the way I'm pouring? Is it because of the ratios? And the more I tried to mess around with it and the more I just kept not making good coffee pretty regularly, I was very demoralized. Until I started looking more into manual hand grinders for a similar price point. And I realized you can get so much more quality out of a manual hand grinder at the similar price point than if you were to buy an electric grinder. And that's when I came across the Comandante C40 manual hand grinder. This thing absolutely changed my coffee drinking experience because it is so consistent and it is so reliable that you can dial in your coffee so much easier because you're not making a lot of boulders and a lot of fines. You're getting so much more consistency in your grinding experience. Because my problem was I had good coffee and I had an appropriate way of brewing that coffee. But without it being properly ground, I was extracting sour and bitter flavors very easily, and it was very exhausting. I almost was like, maybe I should just stop trying. But once I actually got a really solid hand grinder, that was something that it kind of reignited the spark of making coffee again. So there are videos about the manufacturing process and how it's made. Actually, European Coffee Trip got to tour their factory and how everything was made, and they got to go into all the details. It's a beautiful video. You should look it up. And then there are people like James Hoffman and European Coffee Trip, several different YouTube channels that have done comparison videos of other grinders at a similar price point, and you should definitely check those out as well. But what I want to do is I want to tell you my experience with this particular grinder after a year and change of using it. So the first thing I want to mention about this grinder is that it's an absolute beast. It is built to last. The components are incredibly well designed and well made. The plastic on the top part, like, it doesn't take a beating. It's literally just a lid, just so that your beans don't come flying out when you're grinding the coffee. So it really doesn't matter. The bottom is glass, where I could see a lot of people being concerned about it breaking or something like that. I did break one of my glass bottoms one time. I was just being a little bit careless. It was the morning and I was just being a little morning brain-esque, and I dropped it on a kitchen floor that had like really solid ceramic tiles, and it broke. But besides that, I've dropped this a few times, like on the wood or like on the counter, fumbled around accidentally, and they've held up really well. You can get replacements, but if there is a fragile part of the grinder, I'd say it's the bottom. But honestly, I haven't had really nearly any issues whatsoever. Something else I really like about the design is that it's been very easy to clean. There's only a few components that have to be taken apart, and then I use like a little toothbrush usually, like a travel toothbrush or something, where I'll clean kind of the insides and the burrs and stuff like that. But honestly, it's very, very simple to take apart, very simple to take back together again, and I've had literally no problems whatsoever with the cleaning process, which I usually do, depending on how much I use it. I clean more thoroughly probably once every 2 weeks or so. Another really awesome feature is the capacity. There are some grinders that I was looking at and considering, and then honestly, I just couldn't let be in the running to purchase because it couldn't hold 30 grams. This one holds, I think the total is 35, but I use 30 grams for my typical French press recipe and my typical Chemex recipe. So if I've got a grinder that can only do 25, then what am I gonna do? I'm gonna put 25 in, grind it, and then put in another 5 and grind it. That, it's possible, but it's just kind of a pointless part of the ritual when I could just have one that can actually fit everything. And when I've made cold brew and things like that with larger doses, it's nice to be able to put, like, if I'm doing 100 grams, doing like 35, 35, 30, and be able to process all of it with no issues at all. And so I wish it was standard. If it was standard for every single one of these to be able to hold at least 30 grams, that'd be amazing. There seems to be no reason why you should only be able to put in 25 or 20 when there are lots of very viable recipes that call for 30 grams. So that was something, when I saw that, I was immediately like, okay, you're definitely at least in the running. Now, when it comes to the actual grinding of the coffee, it is awesome. And it's felt awesome for literally the entire year that I've owned it. The grinding, the motion of it, the movement, it's all very smooth, very fluid. Nothing is deteriorated when it comes to the quality. It has continued to be a very aesthetic, very refreshing experience grinding coffee in the morning. The one issue with manual grinders in general is that, you know, the finer that it gets, the more difficult it becomes. And my wife sometimes does have it's a bit more of a workout for her in the morning to get some of the coffee ground, depending on if it's a smaller grind size we're going for. But all things considering, it's a very smooth grinder. It's not choppy and awkward. It's just, it feels really good going around the ring, and it's you know when it's done, and you can spin it a couple times. If you watch my videos, it's like a weird tick that I do, but like I like to spin it a couple times just to see, like, okay, there's nothing left in there that got stuck or whatever. But it just feels good because everything's just so stinking smooth. I love it. What's kind of funny is the only issue that I really had with this grinder was actually trying to find it in the United States, because I don't know if it was just during the time that I was looking, but it was so hard to find a grinder, like where they weren't sold out all over the place online and things like that. I ended up finally finding one in a coffee shop in New Jersey, I think it was, that had one of these still in stock to ship. They gave me a free coffee bag with it, actually, which was kind of cool. But it's actually very difficult to find one at the traditional price point of $250 because a lot of them were either overpriced or they were like reselling, and it was just like kind of a scalping thing. It was sort of weird, but I'm not sure if it's the same level of difficulty now as it was, but it used to be so hard to find these guys. And so there were lots of options that I was interested in as far as like the color, like the wood ones and things like that. But honestly, I purchased this one because there were no wood options left when I was actually looking. But I love the color. It's fantastic, don't get me wrong. But probably the most challenging thing about this grinder, the most difficult thing, was the actual finding it to purchase it in the first place. But besides that, I genuinely have no critiques. I have no regrets. There's nothing about this coffee grinder that I'm like, oh, I wish it did this and I wish it didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's nothing about the design. Like, I love the glass. I love being able to see what's all in here. It's, you know, instead of it being something darker or a different type of material where you can't see through. I love all the components. How they've worked for me in the past year has all gone very, very well. There's nothing about it that feels like they went cheap where they should have gone expensive. Like I said, it's literally probably like just the lid, and then like these little guys here that kind of provide structure around the actual grinder itself. But it doesn't seem like any quality was lost because of those things being plastic. I think they knew what needed to be the materials that it did, and they followed through with that. And I really feel like this is just one of those grinders that no corners were cut. Everything was done with excellence, and it is just a beautiful piece of German engineering. Another nice thing about this grinder is that it was fairly easy to dial in different styles and different brewing methods once I got my starting point. And so I began at around 25 clicks or so as my general starting point for like my V60, for instance. And then for my Chemex, I started around 30, and I do the same thing with my French press, around 30 clicks. And then I dial it in from there, because coffee, it changes based on the variety, based on the region, based on the origin. And then on top of that, it changes sometimes with the age. So even if you have it in a really nice container, it's still releasing the gases and the goodness out of the coffee on a regular basis. So you have to keep kind of figuring out, okay, like, do I need to go more coarse or more fine? And you kind of do that cup to cup. But I just love that this is like a rock steady part of the process that I don't have to be as finicky with anymore. Now I'm more concerned about my flow rate, and I'm concerned about the variables as far as, like, you know, me and my pouring method. I'm more aware of those now instead of being so conscious of my grinder. Now I get to focus on things that are a little bit more on the user error side of making coffee in the morning. Now, like I said, I don't have a reference point as far as a good manual hand grinder or a better manual hand grinder in the similar price point. I only have this one, but I absolutely love it, and I would be a salesperson for these guys if given the opportunity. I absolutely stand by this grinder 100%. I think it's an amazing design, and for a manual hand grinder, I would definitely say you couldn't really argue that it's in the top tier. But let me know in the comments if you've upgraded from one of these to something else and if you really like that better, or maybe you made the switch like I did where you thought you had a good grinder and then it failed you and then you decided to step it up and now you've got this beautiful piece of machinery. But whatever your story is, I really do hope that you definitely at least consider purchasing this if you haven't, and congratulations if you have. But wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you're drinking excellent coffee, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.